Super cool. Hello, everyone. Dear audience, welcome to the fifth episode of BeyondQuality Community Podcast with me, Vitaly from Case, with Maryia from Regent Abbey, and with Maaret Pyhäjärvi. Pyhäjärvi, right? Am I doing it right? All right. Thank you so much. Um, Thank you so much, Maaret, for coming and joining us on this topic. This is one of those topics which are really, really close to me. I was a bad manager at my first team, and I lost my friend due to this whole issue. I was overperforming a lot, and I hired my friend, and I saw that he wasn't performing as I was. And bad ideas and bad thoughts started coming to my mind. I thought that he was lazy. I thought that he was taking advantage of me being his friend. And this toxicity grew in my mind. I started controlling him more. But the worst thing I did, and I have to admit it, I installed screenshot taking device on his machine. And then I lost my friend. After a certain period of time, he noticed that, and he said that you, Vitaly, are a good friend, but you're a terrible boss, and I don't want to work for you. And this still is quite painful to recall. Then I started learning about this topic, and Douglas McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y emerged in my Google search, whatever it was then. And I realized that I was just following this idea that everyone is lazy, and I have to control them, and I have to be punishing them, essentially, for not performing as I thought they should have been performing. So now I've published this research. I'm aiming to publish it as a scientific paper where I did meta-analysis of research papers in psychology and neuroscience on this particular belief that managers often think that engineers, testers, developers are inherently lazy. Managers then think, they are lazy, I need to control them more. They introduce more control activities like time tracking, like strict KPIs, deadlines, or even screenshot taking things, or demanding statuses all the time. Then, of course, engineers lose motivation to work, lose their inherent motivation to work, or start losing it. And managers think, I was right. If they are not controlled, they will not work, they will slack. So this is my passion. This is one of the things I'm passionate about, to help managers understand that sometimes intuition fails them, and then we need to study and understand how actually teams work. Maaret, what do you have on this idea?
I call myself a reluctant manager. So I always have a little bit of trouble with the idea of me being a manager. But let's face it, I've been that for a while, no matter how reluctant I am. Also, as a kind of like an individual contributor, my background is with the idea that we do our best job, particularly in testing, that is my specialty. We do our best job when we have agency, we have kind of freedom, and we are in control. So I'm a big fan of agency. Agency means you will need probably a box in which you work in. Uh, Probably outside controls might be hindering you. And I'm looking forward to the conversation, what we can discover in this conversation about all those ideas and how they interconnect.
Maria?
Yeah, nice. Well, actually, I don't have any official management title, but I'm loving leading different initiatives that drive people and that create this inner motivation to do things, to innovate, to create new things. And I believe that it's the best way to create continuity and to make people feel good at work, to make people feel seen and um, create the environment where they thrive and are able and are willing to show passion for their profession, for what they work, and to innovate, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what you, Maaret, said about agency is very, very important. I think that, well, I kind of know that most managers, they were individual contributors. They developed into a new position. And when we are working, it's so interesting, when we are working as individual contributors, we trust ourselves and we control ourselves. So there is no way we can avoid self-control, right? I mean, we're seeing what we're doing. And we know that sometimes we have to force ourselves to work. There is an obvious engineering constraint or time constraint, and we have to force ourselves to work. And we see that it works. We see that if we apply certain discipline to our work, control, like Pomodoro tool, any other tool to help us stay focused and do the things, we then see results. So when we then are promoted to a managerial position, it's so easy to follow the same pattern. We need to control people. And there are very many studies showing so-called control aversion, where when people in a group, in a controlled group, are introduced to more control practices, they tend to slack more. And the reason for that is quite interesting. They lose agency. What you, Maaret, were saying, that if my hands are like controlled, if not even my brain, but my hands are controlled, if I'm constantly monitored, why would I have my own motivation to do things? I'll just lose interest to this. And the interesting thing is that I think the roots or the most influential factors for this belief of the necessity of the control are coming from our culture, from the Protestant ethics, from the Puritans' ethics, where sloth, laziness, is like a deadly sin, that we need to overcome our laziness, and only then we are virtuous. And also, what's so sad is that the current startup bro culture is reinforcing this. I've seen Elon Musk, like bragging about people sleeping in the office in tents. And I was like, wow, what are you doing to people? So, in my opinion, we as managers need to learn that social systems are quite counterintuitive sometimes. For instance, when I was learning about trust and control, those two opposite things, I realized that in order for me to trust people, I need to reduce the amount of control I have on them. And that was really, really hard to understand and to start acting upon. I remember slapping my hands, literally just saying to myself, stop, Vitaly. You don't need to ask them what's going on. You don't need to look over the shoulder. You don't need to do that. You need to give them, as you, Maaret, said, the constraints, the box, the agency to work and to achieve something which everyone needs.
I don't think this is just about kind of like, managers thinking that people are lazy. I think it is, lazy sounds like a easy explanation. But the real explanation that I seem to be running a lot more into is the idea that, people have lack of certain skills, like they haven't learned certain skills yet. And there might be combinations of skills that you need in order to perform well in that position. And again, it's not about being lazy. It's about being able to direct your work in a way where you can acquire those skills, or at least go and seek help from other people with the right kind of skills. So a lot of times, it's the control that doesn't come from the fact that you don't think that people just are slacking off and not trying to do anything. Like that doesn't feel like that is the real problem. At least not me. It's more on the idea of like, again, all of us are learning. This whole industry, software industry that we are in, it's a learning profession. And we are on such different paths. Like, again, like, I'm looking at this from the perspective that there was this saying a few years ago going around where it was saying that, if the software industry is growing, twice as big every 5 years. It would basically mean that if we are a representative group in our job or in any conference, half of us would have less than 5 years of experience. That then means that, all of the people with less than 5 years of experience can't have the same experience than someone with 25 plus years of experience. That's the example I have right now. So again, kind of appreciating that we are on different journeys, uh, and then kind of like trying to move people on that journey to a place where they can provide the results. I feel like that's more of a thing that the managers might actually be solving. And again, I don't think control is the way that solves this. Naming some of those skills, coaching, talking about the problems, talking about what results look like, teaching, skills on how you recognize good work. And again, giving also constructive feedback that I'm recognizing that this is not the greatest work, and then brainstorming maybe the ideas of how you could do better. That's how I have always been framing it, not around laziness.
You made a great point about creating a good environment so that people realize kind of how they could learn more. And I think that it's important because there are a lot of studies saying that, well, one of the or some of the best or most important skills that we need to teach our children so that they become successful and professional in their lives are critical thinking and the ability or the skills how to learn new things and how to kind of find the inner motivation, not external motivation, but inner motivation to to uh, to find new things, to learn, to set the goals, to make the next step in the development, both cognitive and psychological, and so on and so on, and social skills as well. Um, so I think it starts with the educational system, of course, and it creates kind of the basis, the ground for future professionals. And I think that uh, mm, the skills that we'll learn when we're at school affect us a lot and affect how we behave at work and are how we find the inner motivation um, to progress, to progress in our skill set, to make it better and learn new things. And I'm wondering how do you think is what's the best approach to kind of connect school and work and create this environment to make people thrive and make them feel kind of motivated to um, to educate themselves and be better at work each day, learning new thing.
I wonder, Vitaly, do you have a great answer? And what's the best way on doing this?
I love working with juniors, and this is another passion of mine. One of the first junior developers whom I helped is now a CTO. So we started working with him 8 years ago, and I'm really, really happy for him. Why I'm so keen on doing this? There are two main reasons. First is my ethics. I think that I need to give to the world more than I receive from the world. And second is that I would say quite an egoistic reason that I now have a network of, let's say, 30 people, middle, senior, CTO level of developers and employees, whom I can summon if I start my own company, and whom I know really, really well. I know how they work. I know how they learn. I know who they are. So I think the only way for me at least, to overcome the issues that I see a lot in educational systems. For instance, a well-known thing in Russian universities is that many students start learning when it's like 3 days until the exam. The reason for that is simple. They are exam-driven. They are grades-driven. In your system, Maaret, in Finnish educational system, things have changed a lot, and I admire your system because it becomes more practical, so people understand why they need to learn certain things and how to practice it. People practice collaborative learning a lot as well. In the educational system that I was, there was nothing like that. And I saw that if I just leave people alone, if I leave them to grow on their own and develop on their own, they will learn they will just accumulate practices and learn the practices from the university, then from their first job. So for instance, one of the juniors I helped, he joined a company with strict KPIs, strict deadlines, and he was suffering through that. But since we talked a lot to him about the whole process, how it affects him negatively, he at least understood that this is something he has to survive through and not take for granted. So later on, when he became, like 3 or 4 years later, he became a middle developer, he wasn't tolerating things like that anymore. He said that he had then his own professional ethics, his own innate internal motivation. He stopped tolerating things. So I think the only way for us to connect, to help people overcome what they learn at school, at the university, the bad things they learn, is to show them that there are better ways to work. And I also don't think, touching on why managers introduce more control, I think it's not only because people are just bad or they don't know how to work in a different way. It's also because managers are very often afraid as well. Because I've been an engineering manager for like 13 years, and I was punished a lot for my team's results. And the easiest way for me to mitigate this, to solve this problem, was to push harder, was to just push harder for my individual developers and testers. And it was so tempting to do so. I've also seen managers who were just exposing their employees to the higher managers, saying, oh, these employees are just stupid or lazy, like, just fire them, let's replace them. So I think that first, managers need to understand that social systems are managed and controlled in a different way than technical systems. When we control the code doesn't care how much it is controlled, right? I mean, it doesn't have agency. It cannot say, no, I don't want to work for you. You write the code and it works. Or doesn't if you wrote it in the wrong way. Well, people do have agency. And yeah, so managers need to understand that when they are afraid that their team is not performing well, they should not introduce more control, but rather look at the processes. I love what Dr. Deming said, that 85% of system variations is due to the processes, not to the people. Only 15% of variation is due to people. And in my experience, it was really, really hard for me to not look at individual contributors as the source of variation, but rather to look at the system and to see what I can do with the processes. Like you said, Maaret, start helping people, start coaching them, start teaching them, provide them with resources to learn from. This was very hard for me. I'm quite lucky now to be in a company where I can help people and to be in the industry where help is encouraged. But it wasn't always like that.
I still have this kind of like, I think we need both. We need the attention and understanding of the systems, and we need to build better systems. But we also need the attention to the people who are part of that system, who are actually creating the rules into that system. It's not the manager who creates all of the rules into that system. It's the people, and the rules, they grow with the people. So when the people grow, the rules can change. And I think this is kind of what I see, at least, as part of like the inherent structure. Like if I recognize that I have a group of testers who only have experience in this kind of like spec-driven style of testing, trying to introduce them to exploratory testing overnight won't work. That's not a system that can work because the competencies are not in place. So these two are kind of like it's a social technical system in many ways. Like you can have structures that support people in that system, and and different roles, different scopes, and then we can of course talk about kind of like what's the value that you as one piece in this cog of a machine, what's the contribution that you need to have so that you are worth your salary. And these are relevant conversations. Again, I don't think it's a laziness conversation. I think it's a productivity outcomes results conversation, and yes, it is two-part solution. If I think in terms of kind of like how I go about solving this, like I was first thinking like this, three different things that I tend to go to always, like, just outside sources. First of all, you maybe know about the idea of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. The idea that, well, we have Carol Dweck, uh, who, I think, well, her last name was Dweck, but I can't remember her first name right now. I think it was Carol Dweck. She wrote this book about growth mindset and the idea that, if we think of ourselves as someone who is kind of like, just performing certain things and being good at those things, that might mean that we end up in a fixed mindset. And a growth mindset is more about the effort. So you should praise the effort always. And again, kind of like having conversations with people about, do you recognize that you are in these mindsets, or what drives you, because again, stressors in the environment usually drive you to a more fixed way. Like the control is actually what takes you to a more fixed mindset a lot of times. So having that conversation around that model, I find that really useful. Another one, there's a book called No More Feedback. In that particular book, well, there's definitely the conversation about the agency, like having kind of like internal agency, the sense of try and stop me, you can't stop me. I will get this done anyway. Like finding that internal motivation and means of getting into whatever you want it to do is a big part of it. But also it talks about the idea of locus of control, kind of like, not thinking of yourself as a subject, but actually as yourself as responsible. And then scope of considering, kind of like seeing the sphere of how much influence you can have. And it grows all the time. In different roles that you can hold over your career, you will probably have different spheres of considering. Like I'm nowadays considering the entire world. And sometimes it feels a little overwhelming. So I need to kind of, bring down the scope of how I think about it. So that's another model that I very often have conversations on, kind of where are you on these kind of axes. And the third one that I really love is this idea of the what can a dancing man teach you about leadership? That leaders are made by followers. The first follower makes the leader. So again, kind of like even if you were trying to position yourself as a leader, I believe we need to kind of like, make it so that different people lead at different times. We need to share that leadership. The managers are not the only leaders in a group. We actually need to build a culture where, we take turns in leading, and remembering that the best way as a manager to model that is to become the first follower. So those are kind of like at least three conversations I find myself having all the time on kind of like, changing the mindset and changing the organizations. And yeah, we have probably heard these in we've maybe read the books, we've maybe seen the talks, we've maybe been in conferences where this is discussed. But I find that, most of my colleagues at work might not have been there. They haven't had the same opportunities. So then those who have had these opportunities of learning this stuff, maybe we need to just talk about it further. Mhm.
I particularly like this one idea that we can help people realize they can be bigger, that they can develop, as you said, become leaders, not everyone will take the power, take the leadership. People sometimes need to be encouraged or to be shown that they can do that. And this is a very interesting pedagogical paradox, I would even say, that from one standpoint, you want people to grow themselves, like to overcome themselves. And from the other standpoint, you still need to show them that this is possible. This is very interesting what you just said, that sometimes we need to encourage people to develop. I once hired a guy from a bank, and he was a Java developer for 13 years in a bank. And I saw a completely beaten man. He was seriously, like, he was beaten to every single innovation he tried. He was punished. He was rejected. And it took me a year and a half to help him to finally see that he started suggesting things. It was such a pedagogical pleasure to see that this grown man was in a dire condition, I would say, mental condition, not mental, mental, I would say, yeah. And then he started growing back to life and to showing that he had something to suggest. He could do things. It was a true pleasure. I think that managers need to realize that management needs pedagogical, maybe not education, but just at least some education in this area.
And also, I appreciate, again, this story about my current manager. Sometimes, managers need other people in helping them do that stuff. So one of the things that I appreciate my current manager with is the idea that he decided that there's a big change that we need to do, and he's not going to try leading us through that alone. He actually brought in a coach. We had the greatest session this Tuesday because I felt like, he was participating as an equal in the team rather than as the team leader. So like little plays with dynamics, seeking help, allowing others to help you with the overall goal that you have as a manager. That's actually what I think makes some people exceptional as managers, that they can step down and again, relinquish that control that we talked about in the beginning, that it shows up in so many different ways. And it might be, it might be that you're controlling your report, the people who are in your team or assigned as your reporting responsibility. But it might also be that you're controlling yourself. Like you have a very strict idea of what must I be able to perform when I am a manager. And actually, like managers have very few, tools that we have available for us. We can use money somewhere. We can give people goals. We can give people feedback. Like it's not that we can't do the job for the people. And even if I'm a great fan of pairing, for example, or pairing or ensembling, because again, people don't know what they don't know and they can discover new things when they're in that kind of setting. That's not really what I do in the manager role. That is still something that I do because no matter what would be the right thing, there are still things that I want to do and I'm capable of doing, and it doesn't come with the role necessarily. So you can always bring your own intermix of things into anything you're doing.
Yes, it's very important to have someone to believe in you. And I also have a story from my early career when I was starting out as a regular testing professional, and then I wanted to learn automation, and I came to my manager and said like, "Oh, I would like to, learn automation. What would you recommend? Where would you recommend to start, and so on?" And she said like, "You know what? You don't have appropriate education. You can't do that." And I was super embarrassed. But in the end, I kind of um, f- found my inner motivation to go to another person who was not my manager, but he was like my friend, and I was asking the same question, and he was like, "Of course you can do this." And I'm so grateful for this kind of leadership. So he wasn't my manager; he was just a colleague who kind of encouraged me to take this next step, to learn new things. And I'm super happy about this early lesson in my career, because I think that affected me a lot. It showed me that um, the restrictions, all the restrictions, they're all only in my head, and it's all in our heads. It's all in my hands. It's about this growth mindset. The next goal that we set is very important, and I can affect more than I think, because this kind of what we or if we find enough motivation and support around us, then we can do basically anything, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful, because it means that we could do um, anything we want, because everything is kind of um, all the restrictions, they're only virtual. They're not kind of real, if we believe in this, and if we find the support and proper support from both management and unofficial leaders, if we find a good mentor, if we find coaches, whatever, someone who believes in you. And I think that's the most important thing in um,
But maybe
building this growth mindset. Mm.
I guess a comment on like a response to that is a lot of times when people come to a manager, like for example to me, and they say, "Oh, I'm a manual tester and I want to learn automation." What I hear them asking is, "Can I use my work time then?" And my next question is, how much time? It's not about, I'll point you to resources. It's what time will you use on that? So there's always the unspoken question that we might not be able to identify when we go with these requests. So there might be it might be that you might just ask for the resources and not be away from the other word completely. But I have a lot of people who come with this idea that, for the next 6 months, I would like to just, basically be a junior developer with a senior salary. And I do have to have that conversation on like how do we need to, split that. It's not that it's not possible. I absolutely believe it is possible to do that. But you need to somehow figure out how you do not so many maybe courses or long-term learning, but kind of like, you chunk smaller bits and pieces of learning into your day-to-day life, and how you start applying the learnings even before you have learned all of that. So again, the conversation a lot of times for many managers, that's how I find it, is actually a conversation about, am I allowed to use time at work for that learning? And especially if your manager might, sometimes they might not be test professionals. Expecting them to tell you what courses to take on test automation, I feel like it would be kind of unfair.
Mhm.
So actually the question they can answer is how much time I can use and how much, in what kind of chunks. I was just this week doing some calculations again on the idea that I wanted to send people over to a course. The course costs, I think it was like maybe something like 6,000 for 3 days. That was maybe the cost that we ended up with it. But then on the background, I count the cost and like there's some amount of money for the 3 days that those people are being paid as salary. But then there's all of the lost income also in a consultancy. Well, we're actually talking about 70K for 3 day course for 20. And that's a lot of money. And actually, anything that we want to do, any learning that we want to do on our office hours, we need to kind of be budget aware as well with our recourse towards the manager. So I think it's not just what the managers do and how the managers are supporting, but it's also kind of how you ask things. I talked to Alex Sladebek and Elizabeth Zagrova yesterday. They were in Agile Testing Days last week. And they talked about this one talk there. I can't remember who the speaker was, but they talked about this one person who talked about basically how you ask for the kind of feedback you need. And that's the same thing that you need to do with your managers. Like, you ask the kind of support you need. Some people need public praise. I would die if I had to face public praise. So if you need, particularly a kind of, positive reinforcement, don't just expect your manager is able to read your mind. Tell your manager, I need you to listen and not solve my problems. Like you can create those constraints, and maybe those are your first steps toward that, agency and maybe the personal leadership that we all need to have in many ways.
I love what you're saying. I would also add, I'm a big advocate for trying to frame discussions at work in an economical frame set, methodology, or whatever. I have a good experience of getting approved serious projects, educational projects, for instance. Like once I ran a 2 months boot camp for 6 junior developers, aiming to hire all of them, to teach them to a certain kind of a middle-level developer understanding of things, and to hire them all. I was able to prove this in pure economics. Cost of hire, cost of retention, cost of delay, as you've said, like what's going to happen when mentors are busy with the juniors while not doing their work, cost of projects that they could have done, etc., etc. And I got the approval straight away, just like that. I composed the project, of course, and I got the approval straight away. And I enjoyed my time, 2 months' time of mob learning, ensemble learning with those 6 juniors. It was one of my best successes, pedagogical successes of all time. So I would just reinforce what you're saying. If engineers are listening to us, please try to think what you get and what you give in return, because economics is very easy for any manager to understand. If you're saying, I'm simplifying things a lot, but if you're saying that I'm now just doing non-programming testing, not automation testing, but some other types of testing, and I want to add automation testing to my skill set, if you just say it, I want to, any manager, as you, Maaret, said, would ask themselves in their head, what is the company getting in return from that, right? If the manager is proficient in this technical stuff, then they would answer these questions in their head. But if they are not, we have to help them realize what gains this will give. And it's perfectly fine to say that I will enjoy my work much more, and I suppose I will stay in the company for like 10 years or something. Just putting emotions and retention, personal retention in this dialogue is good as well. So yeah, I always advise people to use economics if they can. And if they can't, come talk to me, I'll help.
And maybe this links back to what you talked about earlier on the kind of like, establishing your ethical foundation of what you are as a professional. I'm kind of thinking back to some of the experiences that I have had over the years where to make space for a particular kind of learning, I had a colleague, not someone I was managing, but a colleague who decided that they will make that space by not asking for permission and hoping they don't get caught that their real job wasn't getting done. And when they did get caught on that, because we all suffered the consequences, it was like saying, like, you didn't give me permission when I was asking, so I just took it myself. So again, kind of like maybe then thinking about these kind of things like integrity or professional ethics and kind of where your flexibility on those kind of things are is a good consideration. I'm a big believer in this idea. Well, Grace Hopper at some point said that we should be not asking for permission. We should be asking for forgiveness. I like the idea, but you never have to ask for permission if you do what Elizabeth Ayer said, and you radiate intent. Like you show, I'm going that way. You can stop me if you want to. If you didn't stop me, it's your responsibility. So again, stop asking for permissions, radiate intent, and maybe make sure that you also get feedback on the choices that you're making.
I would also quickly add here, I'm a big fan of categorical imperative Kant, where I try to understand my actions through this lens. Would I like to be treated as such? Would I like my mom, everyone else, my daughter, to be treated as I am going to treat my company and my fellow colleagues? And if the answer is no, possibly I shouldn't do that. And this is very easy rule of thumb, very easy to use. Like, would I love my daughter to go, like I'm framing what we just discussed. Would I like my daughter to go and learn certain skill and tell me about it and be happy about it? Of course I'd love to. But would I love my daughter to go, I'm imagining now, to Thailand for 3 years to learn Muay Thai? Maybe I would be a bit afraid. Maybe I would rather ask, maybe I would rather expect her to ask me before going, right? So this is quite an easy rule of thumb for me.
Mm. Yeah, I think the role of management, or the management role, is or one of the main points of the management is to set boundaries and kind of show and find a dialogue point, kind of to frame things and find the kind of compromise on different things, and create this puzzle of different mm, you know um, different inputs from different people. So if I, as a professional, want to learn something or go to a conference and like expand my knowledge, but lose some money for the company because they don't get paid by the customer because I'm away on the conference. But yeah, it's always a good thing to discuss. What's more important, the next client that I will get hired by because I'm speaking at conferences, because I'm expanding my knowledge, and so on and so on, or if this money that I didn't get from my current customer is more important. And it can depend a lot on the situation and on the input parameters that the company has right now. And it could be super important to get this money right now, for example, and not relying on the future opportunities. Maybe, I don't know. And that's why it's important to speak, to kind of get all the perspectives, because I don't have the same picture as my manager, right? Because he has a lot of different um, yeah, backgrounds and inputs from other products, from internals, from company internals, and so on. And the goals, I don't know. So just ask, just try to not to frame it as a one side game, kind of, and try to communicate instead. Well, communication skills and communication is the biggest issue on all the products, and even here in education space and management space, it feels like communication is a very important skill and point. And
I want to quickly get back to one thing you, Maaret, mentioned. I once was running this mob an ensemble learning group, and I saw that juniors didn't ask for anything and were quite afraid to participate properly. They were afraid to show the lack of knowledge, even though they knew that I brought them in as juniors. So I had to choose a topic which I didn't know, to show them my vulnerability, that I have to ask questions, that I have to ask them, what do you think about this? How can we Google? How can we learn about this process? And their eyes shined and they were like, aha, this guy doesn't know everything. Maybe we can ask questions. Maybe we can show that we don't know everything and we don't know enough. And this was super cool. I would like to start wrapping this episode up with, we discussed a lot, caring about people, allowing them and encouraging them to come up with their own ethics and come up with the suggestions and advise them how to do that. We discussed a lot, setting boundaries and ethics and beliefs. I would like every one of us to give one advice to managers or people. My advice is simple. I think that caring for doing management of the socio-technical system is economically very beneficial. And if you are a manager, then you should think about the economics of your team, of your product. And retaining engineers is economically beneficial in most cases, unless they're doing something wrong. So maybe we shouldn't, as managers, follow our intuition brought to us from school, from somewhere else, but rather learn organizational psychology, read books like Daniel Pink's Why, and the books you recommended, we'll put them in the show notes, and learn ourselves to teach ourselves to become better managers. Maaret.
Yeah. I wonder what my one advice would be. Probably actually the idea that you would understand that even though we talk about management as if it was one thing, it's not one thing. It can be tailored into many different scopes. My personal favorite that I always tell is that people's career is too important to be left on the whims of any manager. So kind of like enabling your direct reports in building their own careers and being just the kind of like the enabler, getting out of the way when they're going in a good direction. That's a good rule of thumb. But you can do it in so many different ways. There's a lot of requirements on what good managers are doing. Um, look at the results, look at what you're building, and do what your heart says is right. Care for the people.
Mm. Nice. And from an employee or a consultant perspective, I would say that I would recommend to dare to show your intent, ask questions, create the dialogue, and explain your goals to the management on using the language that they understand. Meaning to show possible outcomes, results, and benefits that the company could profit from.
Thank you, everyone. That was a very, very entertaining discussion. Thank you so much, Maaret, for coming. Thank you, Maria. And see you next time at episode 6. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you.
Maria